Let me tell you something about the audacity of a woman who abandons her 3-year-old son, disappears for 20 years, and then shows back up with a lawyer, a fresh blowout, and the nerve to call herself a concerned mother. Asterisk. Because I lived it. And if you think you know where this story is going, I promise you, you don't. My name is Ben Stewart. I'm 53 years old. I take my coffee black, and for the last 2 decades I have been the only parent my son Caleb has ever known. I say my son, and I mean it in every way that counts. Every therapy appointment I drove to alone. Every IEP meeting where I was the only one sitting on our side of the table. Every night I spent on the floor outside his bedroom door, just so he could hear my breathing and know someone was still there. Biology didn't make me his father. Showing up did. Welcome to Dad Raw Revenge. Grab your coffee, get comfortable, and remember, the people in these stories had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment, hit that like button, and make sure you're subscribed. Trust me, you're going to love it here. Before I get to what happened, you need to understand how this whole thing started. I met Diane Holloway when I was 29 years old. She was witty, magnetic, the kind of woman who walked into a room and made you feel like the most interesting person alive. We got married fast. Looking back, maybe too fast. Caleb was born the following year. He was diagnosed with autism at age 2. And I want to be clear, Caleb's story is not a tragedy. That boy is one of the most extraordinary human beings I have ever encountered in my life. But Diane looked at that diagnosis and saw a detour from the life she'd planned. I could see it happening in real time. The slow withdrawal, the faraway look, the way she stopped sitting on his side of the room. She never said a word to me about leaving. Not one word. One Tuesday morning, Caleb was 3, sitting on the kitchen floor lining up his crayons by color in perfect sequence. Calmest kid you ever saw. Diane kissed me on the cheek, said she was going to the grocery store, never came back. She left with a man named Robert from her office. She left behind a 3-year-old boy who spent the next 4 days walking to the front door, opening it, and staring down the empty driveway. I'm not going to describe those 4 days in detail. Some things you carry and you don't put into words. You just carry them. So I raised him, alone. I worked construction during the day and studied special education resources at night. I learned his triggers, his rhythms, the exact way his blanket needed to be folded at the left corner, or sleep wasn't happening for either of us. I learned that Caleb communicated best not through words, but through drawing. And those drawings, Lord, by age 7 our refrigerator looked like a museum. By 10, visitors would walk in and stop mid-sentence just staring at the walls. By 14, one of his paintings sold at a New York City auction for $2.9 million. I cried in the parking garage afterward. Full ugly crying. The kind where your whole body shakes and you can't catch your breath. I called nobody because there was nobody to call. It was just me and Caleb. And he patted my arm very gently and said, in that calm, unhurried voice of his, "Don't cry, Dad. I knew it was worth that." I calculated the market trends in 2019. He was 14 years old. I laughed so hard I nearly fell over. Now, here's where you need to put your phone down, find a seat, and pay close attention. 14 months after that auction, I got a phone call from a lawyer's office. A woman named Patricia Dunn. Polished voice, the kind that sounds like it bills by the 6-minute increment. "Mr. Stewart," she said, smooth as glass. "I'm reaching out regarding the financial welfare of Caleb Holloway." I stopped her immediately. "His name," I said, "is Caleb Stewart?" A small pause. "Yes, well, my client has some concerns about the management of Caleb's earnings and would like to pursue a formal review." I sat down slowly. "And who is your client?" Longer pause this time. "Diane Holloway." Now, I want to describe what I felt in that moment, but the English language genuinely doesn't have the right word for it. It's somewhere between fury and disbelief. And that specific feeling you get when someone flips the Monopoly board right after you've built hotels on Boardwalk. I went very still, the dangerous kind of still. "I'm sorry," I said, impressed by how calm I sounded. "Can you repeat that name?" She did. "Right," I said. "And what exactly are these concerns?" Patricia Dunn then explained very professionally that Diane was prepared to allege that I had been exploiting Caleb, that, as his biological mother, she had legal standing to petition for oversight of his financial affairs. That there were, and I'm quoting directly, "questions about whether Caleb's best interests have been properly represented." I set the phone on the table, just set it down, stood up, walked to the window, looked at the backyard where Caleb was sitting under the oak tree in his usual spot, sketchbook in his lap, completely at peace with the universe. Then I picked the phone back up. "Ms. Dunn," I said, "tell your client she is welcome to try." 3 days later, my name was in the press. I still don't know exactly how she got there so fast. Money, connections, or just the fact that autistic teen artist's father accused of financial exploitation is the kind of headline that writes itself. By snorts. Thursday morning I was trending. My neighbors were calling. My boss called. A reporter knocked on my front door at 7 a.m., looking fresh and unbothered. Like that was a perfectly reasonable thing to do. And here's the part that genuinely took my breath away. Diane didn't just come back with a lawyer. She came back with evidence, forged documents suggesting I'd manipulated auction timelines, emails allegedly from my address arranging deals without Caleb's knowledge or consent. She had constructed a narrative so clean, so devastatingly sympathetic, a worried mother fighting to protect her vulnerable son from the man controlling him, that people were running with it before I'd said a single word publicly. Suddenly, I was the villain, the man who had exploited a disabled boy's gift for personal gain. I sat at my kitchen table Thursday night reading the headlines on my phone, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, genuine fear. Not for myself, for Caleb, for what this circus was about to do to the one place he'd always felt safe. My lawyer, Gary Pullman, solid guy, 20-plus years in family law, sat across from me and said carefully, "Ben, she's framed this well. We need to get ahead of it fast. I'm talking press statements, financial audits, character witnesses, the works." I nodded. My mind was already racing through every document I'd ever kept, every receipt, every record going back 15 years. I had plenty. I wasn't worried about the truth. I was worried about the noise before the truth could land. And then, he was holding his notebook, the big black one he carried everywhere. He looked at me. He looked at Gary. He glanced at my phone still glowing with headlines on the table. His expression did that thing it always does, completely unreadable to most people, but after 15 years, I could read every single layer of it. He wasn't upset. He wasn't afraid. He looked almost curious, like he'd just been handed an interesting problem. He pulled out a chair, sat down, opened his notebook to a page that was already filled with handwritten notes, and looked up at us both. "I've been expecting this," he said quietly. "I started preparing 8 months ago." "Caleb," I started. He held up one hand, just one hand, calm as a Sunday morning. "Dad," he said, "let me handle it." And that right there is where the real story begins, dashed in tacks. Stay with me, because what this boy had been quietly building for 8 months, while I was busy raising him, while Diane was busy plotting, was something neither one of us saw coming. Tastic, dear example of you've been listening for a while and want stories like this to keep coming. It really helps if you hit that like button and subscribe. Thank you for real. You want to know what 20 years of loving a child looks like when it's weaponized in a courtroom? It looks like 47 folders, alphabetized, color-coded, cross-referenced, and assembled not by me, but by a 15-year-old boy who saw his mother coming from 8 months away and said absolutely nothing until the moment was right. This is where it gets good. Asterisk. I didn't sleep that Thursday night. I lay on my back staring at the ceiling, running through everything. The headlines, the forged documents Patricia Dunn had hinted at. The way Diane had timed this whole thing with the kind of precision that told me she hadn't just woken up one morning and decided to do this. This had been planned, carefully, patiently, which, ironically, was something I should have recognized immediately, because planning things carefully and patiently, that's a very Caleb trait, and Caleb got it from somewhere, and it wasn't from me. I finally got up at 5 a.m., made my coffee, and sat at the kitchen table in the dark. 30 minutes later, I heard the familiar sound of Caleb's door opening. He's always been an early riser. Another thing nobody tells you about parenting, the way their routines become your whole clock. And he came downstairs in his gray hoodie, sat across from me, and placed that black notebook on the table between us. "You didn't sleep," he said. Not a question. "Neither did you," I said. "I slept 4 hours and 20 minutes. That's my average." He slid the notebook toward me. "You should read the index first." The first page was a clean, handwritten table of contents, numbered section, dates, categories. I turned the page and just stared. "How long did this take you?" He considered it. "I began organizing digitally 8 months ago when I noticed the preliminary legal inquiries." I looked up. "You noticed? How did you even, Dad?" He gave me that look, the one that very patiently communicated that I had once again underestimated him. "I monitor my own financial accounts. I set alerts. Someone ran a background check on you 11 months ago using a firm connected to a law office in Diane City." He paused. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to worry before there was something to actually address." I put the notebook down. I'm not going to pretend I wasn't slightly insulted that my 15-year-old had been quietly running counterintelligence while I was out here panicking. I'm also not going to pretend I wasn't the proudest I had ever been in my entire life. "Okay," I said. "Walk me through it." Here's what Caleb had built. And I need you to understand the scope of this, because when I tell you this boy was prepared, I mean he was prepared the way a general is prepared, not just with a plan, but with contingencies for the plan, and contingencies for those contingencies. First, my records. Everything I had kept over 15 years, every doctor's visit, every therapy bill, every specialist consultation, every school meeting, every single IEP document with my signature as the sole attending parent. Receipts going back to 2007, a log which I hadn't even known Caleb was keeping of every significant event in his life and who was present. Spoiler, it was always me. Never Diane. Not once. Second, and this is where I had to set my coffee down, Caleb's own archive. See, here's something about kids with photographic memories and what his therapist used to call hyper-focused organizational tendencies. They keep things, everything, not as a habit, as a compulsion. Caleb had, without my knowledge, maintained a personal archive of every piece of communication that had ever come from Diane or been about Diane since he was old enough to understand what was happening. Letters she had started and never sent, somehow intercepted from a period she tried to reach out years ago and then apparently thought better of it. A voicemail from 2019. Diane's voice, unmistakably slightly slurred at the edges, leaving a message on a number she didn't know Caleb had access to. I listened to it once. She said, and I will keep this brief because some things don't need embellishment. She said she couldn't handle what Caleb was, that she had made peace with her decision, that she hoped he was being taken care of, but that she couldn't be the one to do it. She left that message in 2019. Caleb was 11 years old. He had saved it in 3 separate locations: cloud backup, external drive, and a physical transcript he had typed himself, time-stamped and notarized through an online service. An 11-year-old had notarized his own emotional trauma. I had to stand up and walk to the window again. I needed a moment. Gary, who had arrived by 8 a.m., and was now sitting beside me, going through the notebook with the expression of a man watching someone pull a rabbit out of a hat every 30 seconds, reached over and very quietly said, "Ben, this kid just won the case." But Caleb wasn't finished. He had also, and I say this with full acknowledgement that he operates on a level I don't entirely have the vocabulary for, anticipated the media strategy. He knew Diane's play wasn't just legal, it was public. She needed the court of public opinion to see Ben Stewart as the villain before any actual judge saw the evidence. And the way you beat that, Caleb explained to us both with the calm demeanor of a man delivering a quarterly report, is not by making a single loud counterstatement. One statement gets one news cycle, he said, then it's forgotten. You release everything at once. They pick what they want and bury the rest. No. He tapped the notebook. You give them one thing per day. You make them keep coming back. You control the pace. Gary stared at him. How do you know that? Caleb looked at Gary the way I imagine Einstein looked at people who asked him to re-explain basic things. I read. Caleb's legal team. 2 attorneys he had researched and selected himself. I'm not even going to pretend otherwise. Began releasing documents to the press in a sequence Caleb had personally mapped out. 1 document per day, 2 weeks, 14 days, 14 pieces of the story, each one landing like a carefully timed drumbeat. Day 1, my attendance records from Caleb's school, every meeting, every conference, 14 years of a single signature on every line. Day 2, therapy billing records, 15 years, 1 guarantor, Ben Stewart. Day 3, Caleb's own statement, brief, precise, devastating, describing his life, his father, and the complete absence of his biological mother in his own words. Day 4, the notarized voicemail transcript, released in full. I'll be honest with you, by day 4, the tone of the press coverage had shifted so completely that I barely recognized it. The same outlets that had been running exploitation allegations rock young autistic artist's world were now running headlines. I won't quote here because it might make Diane's lawyers twitchy, but let's just say the word fraud was appearing with increasing frequency. By day 6, Patricia Dunn issued a statement calling the document "releases an emotionally manipulative campaign." Caleb read it, nodded slowly, and said, "Good. She's rattled." By day 10, 2 of the journalists who had originally broken Diane's story had quietly published corrections. By day 12, Robert, remember Robert from the office, had apparently decided this was an excellent time to be completely unreachable for comment. And through all of it, every headline, every press alert, every phone call I got from Gary saying, "You need to see this." Caleb sat under his oak tree in the backyard and drew, peaceful as ever. Occasionally, he'd come inside, check something on his laptop with the brisk efficiency of a hedge fund manager reviewing a portfolio, and go back outside. One evening, I brought him a glass of lemonade and just stood there for a minute watching him sketch. "Are you okay?" I asked. He didn't look up from his sketchbook. "I'm always okay. This doesn't..." I searched for the right word. "It doesn't bother you? All of it?" He was quiet for a moment. His pencil kept moving. "She bothered me," he said finally. "When I was 6 and 7 and 8 and 9, he paused. "She doesn't have that kind of access anymore." I didn't have a single word for that, so I just stood there and drank my own lemonade. The final hearing was set for a Thursday. On the Wednesday evening before it, Caleb came to find me in the living room, sat down, and said, "I want to make her an offer." I looked at him. "Caleb, I want to offer her the chance to walk away clean in exchange for my silence." He folded his hands on his knees. "And if she refuses," he glanced toward the hallway, toward the room where I now knew he had kept something I hadn't known existed, "I'm going to show her the paintings. 10 years of paintings. Apps stacked. A little boy's love rendered in color, slowly turning into grief. One birthday at a time. And she was about to see every single one. Moments so perfectly constructed, so exact in their justice that your brain refuses to file them under established memory. It files them under, what happened in that courtroom on a Thursday morning in October is one of those moments, and I have replayed it every single day since. Not because it hurt, but because it was the most beautiful thing I have ever witnessed in my 53 years on this earth. Asterisk. This is how it ended. The morning of the final hearing. I woke up at 4:30. I lay there in the dark, doing what I always do when I'm nervous, mentally listing everything that could go wrong. It's a fantastic habit that has never once helped me, and yet, I cannot stop doing it. Gary had called the night before to run through the day's structure, calm and methodical as always. But even he had said, "Ben, I've been doing this 20 years. I've never walked into a hearing this prepared. We're good. We were good. I knew we were good. But Diane had surprised me before, and I was not in the business of underestimating her twice. I got up, made coffee, and found Caleb already sitting at the kitchen table in his suit. A slim navy thing he had selected himself, naturally, with his black notebook open in front of him and a plate of toast he had apparently made for both of us sitting in the center of the table. I stopped in the doorway. "You made toast," I said without looking up. "Sit down, Dad." I sat down. I ate the toast. We didn't talk much, which was fine. Caleb and I have always communicated best in comfortable silence. After about 10 minutes, he closed the notebook, looked up at me, and said, "Whatever happens today, I need you to understand something." I looked at him. "You did not fail me," he said, simply, directly, the way he said everything. "I know you still carry those 4 days when I was 3. I know you think about them." He held my gaze. "You should stop. You didn't leave. That's the whole story." I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. Caleb nodded, satisfied, picked up his notebook, and stood. "We should leave in 20 minutes, or we'll hit traffic on the bridge." I laughed. I couldn't help it. I wiped my face with my hand and laughed. "Yeah," I managed. "Okay, son." The courthouse was a gray stone building downtown that looked exactly the way courthouses always look, like they were designed specifically to make you feel small. Diane was already there when we arrived, standing near the entrance with Patricia Dunn and 2 other members of her legal team, all of them in expensive coats. All of them radiating the particular confidence of people who had not yet realized the ground had shifted completely beneath them. Diane looked, I'll be honest, good, polished, put together in the way that takes real effort and is designed to read as effortless. She was 51 now. 20 years had been kind to her in the ways that money usually ensures. She looked at me when I walked in. I looked back. I felt nothing, and I think that surprised her. She was expecting something, anger maybe, or fear. Instead, she got Ben Stewart walking calmly across the courthouse lobby, eating the last corner of toast he'd wrapped in a napkin for the road. She looked at Caleb, and something crossed her face that I can only describe as a complicated grief. There, and gone in under a second, locked away before it could become anything real. Caleb looked at her the way he looked at most things. Steady, curious, completely unintimidated. He nodded at her politely, like she was a stranger holding a door. She flinched, just slightly. I noticed the hearing started at 9 a.m. I'm not going to walk you through every legal minute of it because, honestly, watching Gary and Caleb's attorneys work with 14 days of methodically released documentation behind them was less like a legal battle and more like watching someone very calmly present a completed jigsaw puzzle to a person who had insisted the pieces didn't exist. Patricia Dunn was good. I'll give her that. She pushed back hard on the document releases, called them a targeted harassment campaign, tried to reframe the voicemail as taken out of context, which, if you'll recall, was Diane on tape saying she couldn't handle her own child. So, I will leave you to decide how much context was missing there. But by mid-morning, even I could see it in the body language of the room. The judge, a measured, silver-haired woman named Judge Carol Whitfield, who looked like she had seen every variety of human nonsense and was perpetually mildly disappointed by it, had the particular expression of someone who had already made up their mind and was now simply allowing the process to complete itself. At 11:15, there was a brief recess, and that's when Caleb stood up, buttoned his jacket, and said to his attorney, quietly, calmly, "I'd like to make the offer now, before we reconvene." I had known it was coming. He'd told me the night before, but knowing something is coming and watching it happen are two very different experiences. Caleb's attorney approached Patricia Dunn during the recess with a sealed envelope. Inside was a single typed page. I had read it the previous night. It was perhaps 3 paragraphs long, and it said in language far more precise and restrained than I could have managed the following: that Caleb Stewart, not Holloway Mound, Stewart, was prepared to cease all further document releases, make no additional public statements, and pursue no civil action for defamation, provided that Diane Holloway withdrew her petition entirely and permanently, waived all future claims to any involvement in his financial or personal affairs, and left, just left. In exchange, he would never speak of her publicly again. That was the offer. Patricia Dunn read it, conferred with Diane in a low voice in the corner of the hallway. I watched Diane's face from across the room, the calculation happening behind her eyes, the weighing of options, the working out of whether she still had a move. Then Diane looked up, directly at Caleb, and she shook her head. I don't know what she thought was going to happen. Maybe she thought it was a bluff. Maybe 20 years of absence had genuinely convinced her she still held some power in this equation. Maybe she just could not bring herself to walk away without taking something. Whatever it was the wrong call. Caleb had anticipated it. He turned to me, and for just a moment, just a flash, I saw something in his face I hadn't seen since he was very small. Not pain exactly. Something older than pain. Something that had been processed and folded and put away a long time ago, and was only briefly visible now on its way out the door forever. Then it was gone. He reached into the portfolio case his attorney was carrying and removed a large flat package wrapped in brown paper. He handed it to the court aide with a quiet instruction. The aide, looking mildly bewildered, carried it to the front of the room. When court reconvened, and the package was opened, Judge Whitfield looked up from the bench with an expression I will never forget for the rest of my life. Because inside that package were not one painting. There were 10. 10 paintings, one for every year from age 6 to 15. Each one the same subject. A woman seen through a child's eyes, from a child's distance. The first one, age 6, was warm, reds and yellows. The woman was rendered in the loose, reaching style of a little boy who misses someone and cannot articulate why. She was facing away, but the colors were hopeful. He had painted her beautiful. By age 8, the colors had cooled, blues and grays beginning to creep in at the edges. The woman was further away now, smaller in the frame. By age 10, she was barely there, a shape, a suggestion. The rest of the canvas was taken up by something else. A house, a tree, a man at a kitchen table, warm light in the window. By age 13, she was gone from the canvas entirely, and what remained was just the tree, the yard, the table in the window, and a boy underneath the oak, sketchbook in his lap, completely at peace. The final painting, age 15, was different from all the others. There was no absence in it, no grief, no searching. It was simply the yard in the early morning, a coffee cup on the porch railing, the oak tree catching light and written in Caleb's precise hand across the bottom corner. Not a title, just a quiet statement. This is enough. The courtroom was so silent I could hear the ventilation system in the ceiling. I looked at Diane. She was staring at those 10 paintings the way you stare at something that cannot be taken back. Her hands were folded in her lap, and she was very, very still. And for the first time since she had walked back into our lives with her lawyers and her forged documents and her recycled maternal concern, she looked exactly like what she was, a woman who had made a choice and was only now fully understanding its cost. Patricia Dunn leaned over, said something quietly. Diane closed her eyes. Not at once. The petition was withdrawn before lunch. She left the courthouse without a word. No statement, no press conference, no parting gesture. She walked through the front doors, got into a black car, and was gone. I stood on the courthouse steps in the October air and felt something I hadn't felt in so long I almost didn't recognize it. Quiet, not silence. Quiet. The specific kind that only comes when something that has been weighing on you for a very long time finally, completely lifts. Caleb came and stood beside me. We looked at the street for a moment, both of us just breathing. "How do you feel?" I asked. He thought about it genuinely, the way he considered everything. "Resolved," he said. I nodded. "Yeah, me too." He looked up at me. "Can we get breakfast? You only had toast." I laughed hard, the kind that echoes off courthouse stone. "Yeah, buddy," I said, putting my arm around his shoulders. "We can absolutely get breakfast." We went to the diner on Carver Street, the one we'd been going to since Caleb was 7, the one where the owner knew his order by heart and never made him repeat it. We sat in our usual booth by the window. We ordered the usual. The sun came through the glass at that low October angle that makes everything look like it belongs in a painting. And Caleb opened his notebook, the black one, the one that had helped dismantle 20 years of damage in 14 days, turned to a fresh, clean page and began to sketch. I drank my coffee and watched the street and didn't say anything because some moments don't need words. Some moments you just sit inside and let them be what they are. The last painting, "This Is Enough," now hangs in Caleb's studio, center wall. Good light. He framed it himself. I asked him once why that one. Why not one of the earlier ones? The warmer ones. "The ones with more color, and because it's the truest one," he said. "It's the one where I stopped waiting." I looked at it. The oak tree. The morning light. The coffee cup on the railing. "Is that me?" I asked. "The coffee cup?" He almost smiled. Caleb almost smiling was worth more than most people's full laughs. "It's always been you, Dad," he said. The man who stayed and the boy who turned 20 years of quiet grief into the most precise, most devastating, most dignified act of self-defense I have ever seen. My son, Caleb Stewart. He didn't need saving. He never did. He just needed someone to show up. And I will show up for that boy every single day until I have no days left. If you enjoyed this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being a part of this community. I will see you on the next one.